Hello everyone. Let's get this set correctly now that I can see it. And as I bring you all up here, live now, so I can see the comments on the window to my left, the camera over here. So welcome everyone. If you can do me a favor, those of you that are already here, and just type in the chat that you can hear me. And you're not a lip reader. Hello, Brian in Virginia, my friend. It's been a long time. Yeah, good. Everyone can hear me. Great. Hello, Dale. Great to see you here, too. Marlene, everybody's hearing me. Hi, GP from Janet McGowan. Hello, Janet. Well, welcome everyone to another installment of Satsang with G, and it really should be, Satsang with me, because it really is for you. Anytime a teacher professes to have some kind of a truth that you don't have, and tries to convince you that you need to believe what they say, run, don't walk away as fast as you can. It's exactly the opposite of real spiritual teaching. Spirituality is not about what you believe. It's about what you discover. It's about what you come to see through your own clear-sighted inquiry and exploration, what is true. You see that it's universally true, but nobody told you that. Nobody laid down those rules. Unfortunately, that's what spirituality in the West became, right? You were spiritual if you were really obedient to all the rules. In fact, the Abrahamic religions, all the religions of the West, are really ethical systems. They're moral systems. This is how you're supposed to behave, the thou shalt nots and all of that. And unfortunately, even though Christ transcended those from the Jewish tradition, the Christians picked it right back up again, which made perfect sense if you're the Roman Empire, right? What you want is obedience, not exploration. The other approach, the other view, was that of the mystic, and it was always a mystic. That all of the religions that got started, all of them came out of the vision of a mystic, who saw so clearly what was true. It was self-evident to them. They shared it, but after a few generations, that original vision got lost. And as the vision begins to get lost, it gets replaced by morality, ethics, good behavior. And as that continues to deteriorate, you get what we see in the West, where people are really, people have been reduced to commodities. They're not citizens anymore, they're consumers. They are machines. They are the servant of the machine. In the United States, we have as much of a master-slave relationship as we did in the South before the Civil War, and it's all because of this profound absence of inquiry into the nature of the self, and an enormous emphasis on my personal self and my well-being at the expense of others. Tribalism, nationalism. That's Albert Einstein said nationalism was the measles of mankind. The idea that the borders and all of that kind of thing. Not quite sure why I went off in that direction. Oh, right. Because we've all been indoctrinated to a certain degree through our education to defer to authority and deny our own experience. Matter of fact, your subjective experience is diminished. It's belittled, right? In this relentless search for objective truth. Well, it's been shown quite clearly that it's impossible. Just the nature of our capacity to with our senses and to perceive, the nature of perception of itself makes it absolutely impossible for us to know an objective reality. So why not consider the possibility that there is no ultimate objective reality that we're all going to point to and say that's the truth, but that there might be, because there's something instinctively in us that knows that there must be something fixed, right? Everything can't be just nothing but a variable. Something has to be fixed. If all of creation is the appearance of smaller and smaller particles, at some point there must be something that isn't an appearance of something else. There must be something that is. That's the question to explore. And what I love to point out is that since you are the universe, you're made of it, everything about you is that you have as much authority for doing this kind of an inquiry as anybody else. And the key to me is the inquiry and exploration of the nature of consciousness itself. Just don't buy the idea that has been presented and universally accepted that what we experience as consciousness is just a highly developed function of the brain. It is just, matter, completely mindless and consciousnessless, somehow evolved consciousness. It's complete opposite in nature. Interestingly enough, all of these theories are coming out of consciousness pondering itself. So no matter what you do, consciousness is involved, right? I mean, no matter what you do, even when you're sound asleep, when you're dreaming, consciousness is obviously there. When you're not dreaming, when it's dreamless sleep, consciousness is still there. It's still aware. I read just recently about some guy who'd been in a coma for like 23 years. I don't know exactly how or why he came out of the coma. And he said he had been aware the entire time. He was just completely suspended in time, but he was completely aware. Consciousness was not in abeyance. It's very telling. But again, I can tell you the conclusions I draw about it, and I can. That won't do you any good, right? Because then it's just another belief system. Believe it or don't believe it. But if we all look together, if we all start examining, if we all use our capacity for discrimination, for critical thinking, for challenging assumptions, because we are that which we are studying, the nature of the study would have to be internal. It would have to be inward. It would have to be looking in here. The Native Americans, as far as I think it was the Native Americans, saw everything. There was the four directions, right? The four cardinal directions. And whenever they do a ritual, they would offer something to each one of the directions because they represented something in their cosmology. But they also recognized up the sky, they recognized down the earth, and they recognized a seventh dimension, which is in. And that because in is where we are, in is what is perceiving everything else, it becomes the most important exploration you can possibly do. That's what satsang is about. Satsang isn't just, a few hours on a Sunday afternoon. Satsang is a way of life. It is a constant communion with the truth, not an intellectual, conceptual truth, but a living, vital, breathing truth, which is your life. Your life is the ultimate koan. It is the ultimate riddle to solve. To solve that is to solve the big question of who am I? Well, the questions are beginning to flow, so I will jump on over here. Please like and share. Doing my job of self-promotion. Rosario says hello. Everything's okay. Great. Tom McClellan, hi GP, listen every week, but first time catching full live show. Wonderful, Tom. Where are you located? Eva, my friend in Poland. Namaste GP, waiting for the possibility of being with wisdom. Me too. me too. I'm just really curious to see what's going to happen today. Tom says, hi. Oh, Tom is also from Poland. It's nice to be here, though. Great. Robert Ing. Hi, Robert. So good to see you, my friend. Yes, wonderful. Chris Skills. Hello, Chris. My friend in Liverpool. That's amazing. Hello, GP. Good to see you. Why does the mind always repeat itself? GP, is it because I am giving attention to the subject all the time? Is that the reason why the mind seems to always be repeating itself? Interesting question. Well, first off, it's a function of life, right? Your heart is constantly repeating itself, isn't it? That's a good thing, right? I don't hear anybody complaining about, oh, my heart, it's so repetitive. It just keeps doing the same thing over and over again, right? Or my hair just keeps growing. I mean, nobody really complains about that, right? Because we don't take issue with what that pattern is. Look, all of life is a pattern, isn't it? You could call it conditioned energy. Take any blob of anything, turn it into a form. Its essential nature is the substance out of which it's made, but it is appearing as a form. It has a function, has a purpose, has an interconnection with other forms. It's being perceived by a form. And what is it? It's simply conditioned patterns of energy. That's all thought is. So it gets repetitive simply because that's the environment that it's in, right? If you hear the same thing from your parents over and over again, you're going to hear it in your head eventually. Everything that you learn and you believe is going to repeat itself. Belief is a powerful binding agent that holds thoughts together, it holds them in a pattern. And that's not a bad thing. I can deal with repeating patterns, but what about, if thoughts were just kind of like random and beep, just like some crazy sounds or something, it might be even more disturbing. It's simply the nature of thought to take form. Once it takes form, right, and keeps repeating itself, we tend to not pay all that much attention to it. That is, we don't pay attention to the content of it, and most of the time we don't even know what's going on. It's one of those things like everything else in the human nervous system. When you do it enough times, you begin to forget about doing it. It just happens, right? Driving a car. How many of you remember when you first learned how to drive? It was like, right? And as you were getting it, and now what do? I mean, I've seen people, talking on the phone, putting on makeup. I mean, texting, which is not wise because the body has to needs the eyes in order to drive. It can't do without that. But you get the picture. Riding a bike, any of these things, we don't think about them anymore. Now, thought patterns are exactly the same. Once a habit, a pattern of thought is put into place, because it's always initially appropriate for the environment. It may not be good, but it's a direct reflection of the environment. That pattern becomes automated. It becomes installed and continues to go to move on, and we barely even notice it anymore. The only time we notice it is when some little light inside of us dawns, and we actually look at the thoughts that are going by, the patterns that are going by. Then we're going, what the hell? What? We'll say something like, what was I thinking? Well, you weren't thinking at all, right? There was simply a habit pattern going on, and it was going on without any intervention or any support from you. right? That's simply, you became literally unconscious of the character and content of your thoughts, of the thoughts that were making that had formed into that pattern. So it's not like you did it, you created this belief, you created this. Nobody really did it. The same thing happened to your parents, and it just got installed in you, and and on and on. There's no real perpetrator, and we're all victims, right? We're all stuck with it. And awakening, to demystify it, is simply the act of paying attention to what's going on inside your own mind and your own body and your own emotions. That's what it is. Suddenly, if you look at your thoughts and the pattern of the thoughts, and the very fact that you can say, why does the mind always repeat itself, means that you have already taken a step back from the mind and are looking at it critically. Now, what is that that's looking at the mind critically? And I don't mean critically like judging, right? I mean like critically as in assessing, right? Going, wait a minute, what is that? Right. Now, you don't do that when you're in the middle of it, when you're unconscious, right? As you become conscious, as you awaken, right? Suddenly, these things that were just going on without your permission or your input, suddenly you go, whoa, what's that? It's like, suddenly you realize that there's some horrible thing on TV, and it's just been going in the background, and you haven't really been paying attention. You go, geez, why? I feel so annoyed. What the hell? Oh, God. And you turn it off, right? Now, your mind's, because it's an energy pattern, it's an organic energy pattern, you just can't turn it off like that. It doesn't have an on-off switch. But recognizing that it is, there's two things you can do. You can consciously switch the pattern, right? Or you can simply remove your attention from it, right? Now, obviously, if you see the pattern, if it was a pattern you liked, you wouldn't be asking the question. So it's clearly something that isn't really helpful. Now, here's the number one thing not to do when you're in that situation, and that is, do not ever for one moment get in a fight with it. Never for a moment get in a fight with it. Don't argue, don't judge, don't push it away, don't judge yourself, don't judge the mind. Oh, the terrible mind. No, it's not there's nothing terrible about it at all. It's like saying that the rainstorm is terrible, right? The thunderstorm or a hurricane is terrible. No, there's no moral judgment in this at all. The mind isn't horrible, it's just a pattern. That's all it is. And if you see that, then and you see that you're not responsible for it, you're going to get the consequences of it, but you didn't create it. It's not like you're personally culpable for all of the horrible thoughts that are going on. So instead, in that moment of awakening, you have the opportunity to begin to withdraw your attention from it. Now, for most people, awakening is not a sudden blast and it's over for good. Matter of fact, I have never actually seen anything even remotely close to that happen. It's always been, either really gradual or some, explosions of insight, right? And then a gradual integration or unfoldment of those things. That's certainly the way it's been for me. I wouldn't even claim myself to be an awakened master, right? I've just watched this process. I am awake, right? Relative to what? Well, relative to where I was, for sure, right? I can't compare myself to Buddha, really, except that every time I have a new insight and I go deeper in my experience, I find he's been there before me. And he talked about it, right? So I go, okay, then this is probably the right direction to go. But I think I'm digressing a little bit. If in the spirit of self-love and compassion and understanding, which the three of those go together, love, compassion, understanding, the three of those go together. The more understanding is, the more compassionate you are. The more compassionate is, the more open you are. The more open you are, the more loving you are, and the more understanding is available to you. when there's judgment and harshness, either of ourselves or the thought patterns or somebody else's thought patterns, we're not open to any kind of healing or change. We're in conflict, and it was conflict that created the thought patterns in the first place. So you simply notice it, get a little smile on your face, because nobody's doing it, right? It's like a computer, it's a robot just playing. Nobody's trying to mess up your life. And if you do that with that kind of self-compassion and curiosity about just really the nature of it, and a bit of gratitude for the eyes being open to even see the distress, the difficulty, you have created the perfect environment for that pattern to simply dissolve, because it's not getting the same kind of attention anymore. It's not getting the attention of you believing in it. It's also not getting the attention of you fighting with it, which is just another form of attention that feeds it. So it's a very long-winded answer to your question, Chris. I think I covered all the different aspects of it. If I didn't, I'm sure you'll let me know. Paramjit, namaste GP from London. Hello, Paramjit. So good. Parmi. I think you told me to call you that. TD Graphics. Hello, GP. I go by TD. Troy Dunn. Curious, what does GP stand for? Can you please share? Sure. It stands, it's just my initials. My actual name is Gregory Paul Walsh. And I just shortened it to a GP. There were a lot of people who, I had friends who started calling me G. Hey G, what's up G, right? And I just it just kind of stuck after a while. And when I started doing this kind of stuff, it just made for a nice short URL, GP Walsh, right? And so it just kind of stuck. So that's where it came from. That's what it means. It's really interesting because the word Gregory, I don't know exactly what its origin is, but it means vigilant or the watchman. Somebody's constantly watching, and vigilance is something, as a child, it was an absolute necessity for me. And as I've gotten older, I've learned that to be vigilant about watching, just like I was doing with Chris, just let's watch these patterns of thought and see what requires a vigilance. And it requires a vigilance to stay awake once you've had even a little glimpse of it. It requires vigilance. The momentum of the sleep, right, continues. Even you can get to very high levels of spiritual attainment. And the very act of attaining itself is a place where you can go to sleep. You just be vigilant. My middle name, which I find really fascinating, is Paul. People are familiar with that, St. Paul and all that. But it's the beauty of the story of it is that Paul changed his name to his name was actually Saul. And in Hebrew, the word Saul means, I believe it means a bitter man, an angry, bitter man, who he was. And after his awakening experience, he changed his name to Paul, which, interestingly enough, was a Greek word, not Hebrew, and it means to cease to be. Our modern word pall-bearer, or a pall came over the room, is related to that. And to me, that's very pertinent as well, because what we really are seeking is the end of enslavement to the egoic mind. I don't want to just say we're trying to get rid of the egoic mind, because that's not really what it is. We're simply trying to see it for what it is, which is simply one of those patterns of thought and action and feeling and everything. It's a real system. It's a real matrix of things. That I was talking to Chris about earlier. It's just a pattern of thought and energy that got put into place naturally. This is what the nervous system does in response to the environment, and it happened completely without any input from you. So, you accuse somebody of having a big ego, or even extreme ego, which is like narcissism or something like that. It's not, we all do. We all have a big ego, right? Until you see through it, right? It doesn't matter whether the ego is grandiose, and self-aggrandizing, or if it's spiritual and it's being really good and obedient and helpful and loving and kind and the like, or it doesn't matter if it hates itself and abuses itself. It's all the same. It's a pattern of thought that got put into place involuntarily in response to the environment. It is a totally adaptive, compensatory function, and its only purpose is to get the nervous system into some kind of a form that is likely that it's going to survive. And of course, we're all sitting around here having this conversation, so it worked, right? That's what it is. That consciousness, when consciousness steps back and sees that pattern, you are experiencing awakening from the illusion of the ego. I am not that pattern. I am something witnessing that pattern. Now that doesn't mean the pattern, vanishes and heaven's part and all of that. It doesn't. It never goes that fast. In fact, if it did, you'd probably become dysfunctional, right? But the intensity of it begins to drain away. The importance of it drains away. It becomes more funny. It becomes more odd. It becomes less dominant. The functioning of the nervous system actually gets better because it's not been enslaved to an idea that you've now seen through. God, I hope that's clear. Never before have I ever done a little discourse on a subject because of what my initials meant. So that was the first. Y'all witnessed it first here. So thank you, TD. Nazrin Golden, hi. I'm experiencing conflict. After practicing inner reconciliation, I asked, what do you protect me from? The voice in my head said, from you. Is that my judgmental voice? Let me tell you a story. When I first, one of the first really profound experiences that I had that made me realize the depth and significance of this, and really if I was to pinpoint a particular place that is probably the origin of inner reconciliation, it's this story. Prior to that, I was beginning to realize that I'd known the spiritual teachings about the ego and stuff like that. I'd seen how the way we think about ourselves isn't necessarily what we actually are, how easy it is for us to get deluded. But one particular point, I think it's about 10 years ago, probably a little more now. Yeah, wow, more. It was before I even, before 2009 when I put my first video up on YouTube, before I created my first product. I was before that. Anyway, I was wanting to have a bigger reach. It seemed like there was a ceiling on my growth. I could only get so far, and I couldn't get any further. And things would just fall apart. People wouldn't show. Nothing worked. Nothing worked at all. It was if something was keeping me down, keeping me invisible, keeping me small. Well, one day, I kind of just, running into that obstacle again, I just kind of stopped for a second. I put my hands in my lap, and I said, what's going on? What's going on? I've tapped, I've meditated, I've done all these things. What's going on? And I just closed my eyes for a second, and I was just kind of sitting there, and I just turned my attention. I asked that question very deeply inside. I didn't know to ask what you were protecting me from or anything at that point. I just kind of really, I think, humbly and genuinely, in bewilderment, threw up my hands and said, what's going on? Whereas before, I'd always think I had the answer, right? I'd ask the question humbly and then I'd answer it. Right? So anyway, I'm sitting there And suddenly, this vision pops into my head. I'm sitting in a room. It's like a boardroom, right? And all around the table are these guys, are Secret Service guys, right? You know, they got the earpiece, and they got sunglasses on. They're all in, you know, white shirts, black ties, you know, totally inconspicuous, right? And one in particular is like right here, right in my face, right? One of these guys. It was like Smith from The Matrix, right? and you know, Mr. Anderson. Anyway, I was like, what are you doing here? What are you? Right? I started having a dialogue, a conversation with it. Again, I knew nothing about inner reconciliation, right? And he just says a few days, what are you here for? He says, I'm here to protect you. I said, well, protect me from what? He said, from everything. Everything. Everywhere is danger. I go, wow, really? And I said, well, I mean, but what about me? I said, oh, you're the worst. We have to protect you from you. You're the worst. You're the most difficult of all. And I said, okay. And suddenly I realized that I was talking almost archetypically to the inner energy of safety, which was presenting itself to me in the form of these Secret Service guys who were literally putting me in a closet. You know, from the point of view of somebody whose job it is to protect somebody else, what would be the best way to do it? Well, you chain them up, you throw them in a closet, you just give them food, you never let them out, and you'd have, you know, layers of guards around them. They'd never have a life. You know, the conflict for the Secret Service in any country that's protecting their leaders, the leader wants to interact and go out there, and their job is to protect. It's just constant back and forth. It's a perfect illustration of it. So anyway, I'm sitting there and I go, okay, so well, look, Smith, you got to do your job, right? Right. And, you know, the moment I said, yeah, I get it. You really do have to protect me. That's your job. The moment I said it like that, rather than get off my back, give me some space, there was a slight change in the energy. He was just kind of looking at me. I said, I know you got to do your job. I do need protecting. And you're right, I am the worst. I do all sorts of stupid things, right? Right? So I totally get it. But could you do me a favor? Could you protect me outside the room? Could you just, like, you know, give me some space, right? I mean, you don't really have to be right here, do you? And I looked at him, and he just kind of looked at me. Said, okay, but I'm going to be right outside. And in that moment, the scene disappeared. This incredible weight just came off of my shoulders. My breathing changed. And I think it was probably 2 or 3 weeks later, I started the Conversations with G show that at one point had like 25,000 downloads. All of a sudden, all the things that were hard started to become easy. And of course, it was a revelation for me. And that was the first time I'd actually talked to the various energies, had a conversation. And it really was the solidification of inner reconciliation at that point, although I didn't even have a name for it. It was just, you know, talk to the energies and stuff, right? So it's almost archetypal in its nature. It's dreamlike, right? But this is the actual nature. We've just become way too rational. It's not rational. It makes sense, but it's not necessarily rational. So it isn't, just to get back to you, Nazarene, it is not a judgmental voice. It is a genuine expression of the energy system that sees you as a threat to yourself, a threat to it. See, if you fight with the energy of protection, right, how is the energy of protection going to interpret that? It's going to interpret that as danger. And what happens? it gets more aggressive, more urgent, more unwilling, intransient, unwilling to compromise even, right? So I would just go back to that voice and say, whoa, okay, I've been making it difficult on you. I'm sorry. What can I do to make your job easier? And by the way, you're protecting me is really great, but there's all these things I really want to do. Is there a way we can do both? Is there some way you can protect me and I can have more freedom? The answer is no. That's fine, and it might be for a while. But there's other things too. I'm really willing to shift whatever I need to shift to make me not so difficult to protect. Anyway, you can approach it like that. Does that help you, Nazrin? Sally Atterton. Hi, Sally. Hi, GP. It's Sally from Southeast England. Great to see you today. Good to see you too. Wonderful. Ursula. Hello from Portugal. Hello, Ursula. Ducks. Hi, GP. Oh. I don't know what it is about the YouTube thing here, but I start scrolling and all of a sudden it jumps to the bottom and I have to go back up and find my place. Ducks. Hi, GP. I noticed that after daily and constant practice, I became better at calming my mind instantly, but the duration is always dictated by conscious awareness. I habituated only the speed of calming. Well, that's pretty good. Yeah, let's chalk one up for you. That's pretty good, actually. What I would recommend is that you make this practice of calming the mind more about freedom of expression and less about just having a quiet mind. It's not a goal to achieve. The more our attention is open and spacious, the less judgment there is about what the mind is doing, then the less influence and force it has, which means the speed at which it calms down or the duration for which it calms down stops having a great deal of meaning. If it does have meaning, you've got a subtle conflict going on. You're kind of still in a bit of a battle with the mind. So your daily practice has kind of readjusted the nervous system so that it's quicker to let go of the patterns of thought that had caused you distress before. So keep doing that practice. But remember, the point of any of these practices is not to simply get to a better state of consciousness. It is to get to the state of consciousness. It is to get to the reality of who you actually are. It's not you with a more quiet mind. Right? It is you fully realizing who you actually are. Realizing you're not the mind, but the mind isn't a problem. It's part of the functioning of life. But it's not you. It's just not you. Does that help for you, Ducks? The more you emphasize simply the wanting to know what is true over the various kinds of processes and techniques that assist us in that, then the easier this whole thing is going to get. Because there's no special need to acquire or attain or anything like that. Because there can be somebody who has a mind completely out of control, they can't ever calm, and they can wake up like that. It's all a matter of the tiniest little gap opens. The truth is right there, sticking its foot in there. Yep, come on, I'm in, right? Because the truth is your nature. The truth is always here. It's never left you. Right? We've just gotten so used to the way we've been trained to think and react that we're just kind of, it feels as if the whole purpose of that is to get rid of the suffering and the conflict about that. That's the effect of it. What it really is doing is directing your attention back to that place that isn't suffering. Right? It's not to just get rid of the suffering, but to find the place in you that isn't suffering. Right? Sally's question is right here as well. I'll pick this up while I'm talking about that. Does suffering lead us to the truth of our being? And if so, how? Yes. For whatever reason, I don't know anybody who's ever gotten even close to awakening who hasn't had a fair bit of suffering in their lives. When we are suffering, we have two choices. We can examine the suffering to find out what its origin is, and therefore find a cure for it, or we can try to suppress it, sedate it, distract it, which is what our culture does. We live in the most neurotic and materialistic and self-denying, inhuman culture that has ever been created. The West and the United States in particular. And so every opportunity is given to you to not look at your suffering, but to avoid it, but to suppress it, which means it's still there. It's festering. It's just dormant. That's all. If we pay attention to the suffering, it is the perfect motivator to make you explore, well, what is really true? Is there an end to suffering? Remember, that was Buddha's motivation. Somebody had very little exposure to all of that. Everything was handed to him, and it was perfect. And when he was really exposed to old age, to decrepitude, to sickness, to poverty, to death, I mean, it just ripped his heart out, and he went searching for the answer to suffering. He did not go looking for enlightenment. He's trained in that culture. There was stuff about that. He was a prince for crying out loud, so he had access to all the information of the Brahmins and the like. But he went out looking to the solution of suffering, which is exactly what he eventually found and shared with us. So, does it? If you are so inclined, you will take your suffering and you will let it lead you to the truth of your being. If not, if you're a typical Westerner, you will say, well, my suffering is caused by the fact that by some external condition, I don't have enough money. Okay, well, I need to make more money. And off you go, make more money. I'm alone. I need a relationship. So you get a relationship, right? Everything is always some kind of external solution, and of course, when that gets really trivialized and gets commodified, it becomes about all the various kinds of addictions we can have, just endless entertainment and distractions, one after another, and a lot of people profit from it. And let's face it, if we can anesthetize ourselves for a minute, we'll probably choose that. Nobody says, I'm really into this. Let's go suffer for a while. You can't market. How do you market the crucifixion, right? It's like, I don't care what kind of spin you put on it. Hey, it's $1 million value, only $19.99. I don't care what kind of spin you put on it, right? It's still the crucifixion, for crying out loud. So, and that's what you're talking about, to actually go directly into your suffering, to explore it, to become curious about it. I mean, the real question is, why aren't I happy? Why is this pain here? Why do I deny myself genuine inner pleasure? Why do I deny myself intimacy? Why do I stay hidden? Right? And if you get really curious about that, you begin to see all the layers and structures and constructs that make up the place that we are experiencing superficially as suffering. And the deeper you go into that, the less suffering there is. Yes, there will be pain, traumas, some deeply traumatic material will come to the surface. There will be very real and very personal episodes that literally pushed you right to the point of death. And if it hadn't been for the capacity of the nervous system to simply completely cut off any emotional contact with it and freeze it, you'd be dead. But it's still there, and so this becomes the opportunity to truly release and heal that energy. And I don't know any other way to do it, and one needs to do that whether they're awake or not. And don't let anybody tell you that awakening is basically a get out of jail free card or even a discount card. It isn't. Matter of fact, it impels you even more to go deeply into your suffering. The more awake you are, the more willing you are to do that. So and I know a lot of people who on a spiritual path, and their expectation is it's going to be easy. I thought that, and after life beat me up, unceremoniously and thoroughly enough times, I said, well, obviously my strategy isn't working. I'm not really getting anywhere at all. And so I had to look at it much more closely, and eventually led to all the things that I'm doing now, and a deepening. So the awakening wasn't just some kind of angel singing moment. It really began to permeate, to just take up residence in every cell, every strand of DNA. So hope that answers you both, Ducks and Sally. Let's see, Dave and Elaine. Hi, GP, and all greetings from a very windy southeast England. Hello to my good friends there. Nazarene, I have a strong sexual energy. How can I transform or channel it to creativity? Well, sexual energy is the energy of creation, right? I mean, if we didn't have that strong energy, none of us would be here right now, right? I mean, it's kind of, the first thing is come to understand it. In your question, what I see is a perception that there's a powerful energy within you, right? And you want to use that to put that to some other purpose without actually understanding it itself. The sexual energy is very, very powerful. It's also very beautiful. When it is interpreted by a culture, as a taboo or something, either as a taboo and strict, or promoted and objectified, you get such a distorted view that no real harmony takes place, no intimacy, no genuine interchange, because it is our desire to be connected. It's one form of our desire to be connected to one another, and it's a very powerful expression of the bliss when we do. When we do fully, openly, intimately, purely, honestly, with real presence. Right? So then the next question I would ask is, do you not see yourself as being creative enough? If you feel really comfortable in your own skin, in your own body, in your own sexuality, right? It isn't going to inhibit. It's not like you have to take that energy and go over and bring it into creativity. Your creativity is there. It's innate in us. If you looked at it in the chakra system, the sex energy is 2, the creative is 6, right? It's a different vision. It's a visionary kind of function, but the two necessarily interplay because sexual energy is very earthy. It's very juicy. It's very make things happen. It's like go and do. right? Whereas the more visionary, the more, talking about pure creativity, it's just imagination, flights of fancy. It's vision, right? A vision for what is possible. Now, the more we are really comfortable, pierce through the ridiculous rules of the culture, and become really comfortable to find our innate balance, right, between the genders, between ourselves and our sexuality, so it isn't belittled and it isn't made too much of or too little. What happens is a powerful life energy just naturally, the prana just flows, right? The chi just flows because it's not being restricted. And of course, as it flows, it's feeding the other parts of you, including creativity and the like. And of course, the creativity is going to help with sexuality. Just take a tantra course, right? I mean, it just be present and intimate and creative and open but again, it's an ongoing kind of thing because we've all been indoctrinated. We've all been enculturated negatively. Especially if I don't know where you are, Nazarene, but here in the United States, it's horrific. It's horrific. The heritage of the Puritans is just like insane. They were insane. What can I say? They were good Christians of their day, but they were really quite insane. I just heard recently that the Puritans were appalled when they came to the United States. They mentioned two things when they came over here and met the Native Americans. There were two things they just thought was utter appalling, and one of the reasons they regarded them as savage. Number one is they never hit their children, which they thought, spare the rod, spoil the child. And when their children cried, they would pick them up and hold them and comfort them. They thought that was crazy. They thought that was, whoa. It's like, so this is our heritage, okay? So it's ingrained in much of the West, because this is kind of the idea of the West. So I hope that answers the question for you. I mean, all of these questions, the answer, I hope I'm communicating correctly that there's no answer, right? Ask this question, get this answer, done. Like it's a test, right? It's a pointing to a direction, right, of inquiry, of ongoing inquiry, because this never stops. The nature of us as human beings is literally infinite. It is forever unfolding. What is a human being? Well, what is it this moment? That's the only thing you can say, because you can't say what it is, right? Because it's a forever developing, growing, evolving thing, evolving out of, and giving expression to that which is beyond all explanation, right? So, whether it be creativity or sexuality or any or intimacy or a relationship, anything of the heart, anything of the mind, anything of your divinity, physicality, there's no end to it. It's not like, okay, I got the answers now, I'm done. You realize that the answer is in the inquiry. It becomes a recognition that everything that's being made manifest, everything you're experiencing, has a common origin. But that common origin cannot be just grabbed and put into a box. And everything that we're experiencing arises out of that, gives expression to that, and is virtually unlimited. It is just forever unfolding, like the flower that never stops opening. When you see that, you have settled into that perfect place where you are what you seek. You are. There's nowhere to go. There's really nothing to do, and yet there's a million places to go, and there's always something to do. There's always something new unfolding, but it's always a new insight into what you know yourself to already be. So, the path is the destination, so that even while there's a path and there's a walking on the path and there's all sorts of things that are happening, there's a sense of being home. There's a sense of not moving. Doing without doing. Knowing without knowing. Accomplishing without accomplishing. That's when the real paradox and the mystery of being simply becomes clear. Right? Not clear in that, oh, I understand it now, but clear in the sense that, my God, this is the eternal mystery. Thank you, Nazrin. You made a little comment further down about something. Very open about it. Thank you. It causes me suffering. Okay. Why does it cause you suffering? Right? How could something as utterly beautiful and natural as our sexual impulse cause suffering? It can't be in the sexual impulse itself. So I can see now that you're wanting to rechannel that over to creative outlets is a way of trying to alleviate the suffering. By all means, you know, it's a fine thing to do. Even if you're feeling really aroused and there's nothing you can do about it, take that energy and do something else. No harm in that whatsoever. If it becomes a chronic thing, now you're avoiding, right? It means you've got some kind of trauma, some kind of, and we all do, especially around sex. Oh my God, we all do, just because of the cultures that we've been raised in, and that's pretty much universal. I mean, the West is really horrible about it, but the East is very restrictive about it too, especially the role of women and all that sort of thing. It's like, it's very, very harsh. So use this as an opportunity to overcome your enculturation and become clear and really embrace what it means to be human. And that, because that's a big part of it. Good Lord, it's a big part of it. It drives all of life, right? And so the suffering is never in the actual functioning itself. The suffering isn't even in the ego. The suffering is in our identification with it, thinking that we are that, and now thinking there's something wrong with that energy. I got to get rid of it. It's, you know, it may be causing you discomfort, right? If you have a lot of sexual energy, but if you're really totally accepting of it and embracing of it, and you use that as an opportunity to explore the traumas that you had about them and release them, and give yourself permission to actually enjoy the juiciness that comes with this body, which in my experience is even more for women than it is for men. Their bodies seem much more sensitive than men's do. Then that energy will naturally find a very appropriate and very satisfying vehicle for expression. Right? And then it won't cause you suffering anymore. It won't be your master, you'll be its master, but you won't be dominating it. You will be playing with it. It won't take you over. But in a sense, even if we try to push things away because it cause suffering, they've taken you over. It's dictating the terms instead of you. We have been so alienated from our bodies, especially here in the West. We have just been so cut off of our natural inclinations, our natural feelings. It's a long road back to health in general for the culture. It doesn't have to be for individuals, but it's a long road back, and it's created, really, that kind of suppression has created the world where we're just suppressing is acceptable, and we've got huge industries just trying to, provide you with more and more crap you don't need to help you with your suppression. We need to dedicate ourselves to healing, right? And healing has to start by recognizing the natural functions of the nervous system, of the body, of life, of humanness, of everything, to appreciate everything as it actually is and not simply try to turn it to our purposes, which is all completely sick. That's how you get the kind of world we live in. It's a bunch of traumatized, suppressed people running the world, right? Who, because they don't have any inner power, they have no way to deal with their own inner suffering. They seek to control the outside through external means. I mean, we all do that to a certain extent. We want to go shopping with, right, or get on Facebook or something like that. But you take that on steroids, and you've got a real megalomaniac, traumatized up to his eyeballs with his finger on the nuclear button that could end the world. That's what we got. And that's the cause. And I really recommend that we really take seriously doing this inner work for ourselves, because that's the only way we're going to turn the tables, and healthy people tend to dominate. Those who have learned how to process this material and can embrace the others will begin to be much more influential over the affairs of men. So, I hope that helps, Nasrin. RB, wouldn't a state of pure excitement, ecstasy, be the highest vibration compared to nothingness? Well, nothingness, first off, I think by what you mean by nothingness is stillness. How can you have a state of pure excitement and ecstasy if you have no complete stillness and emptiness to compare it to? Right? It's always a perception of opposites. If you were in, this is the state of addiction. I managed to get to an ecstatic state through a substance, right? Can't maintain it. So I want to do it again, right? Now, if you could maintain it permanently, it would become your new norm, and you would need something else. So no, it is not the highest vibration. It is a high vibration, but all vibrations come and go. The nothingness you refer to, which is better described as just the emptiness, it is just the background, the space in which everything happens, which is not actually empty. It is simply, think of it more as the potential for everything. Right? Everything arises out of pure potential. Now, you can't see anything in pure potential, right? Because it's still potential. You don't see it until it actually is actualized. It comes into some kind of form. It comes to exist. And the word existence is a Latin word, and it simply means existere, and it simply means to come out from. It means just something gets distinguished from the background, right? But it's still part of the entire picture, right? That's all the emptiness is that pure potential. When the potential happens, it's energy, it's vibration. But notice that it doesn't exist in a vacuum. We have the feeling of ecstasy only in comparison to the deep feeling of like grief or something. You can't have one without the other. That's one of the most powerful and essential of Buddha's teachings about interdependent arising. Nothing arises on its own, right? The only thing that exists purely as itself is the self, that pure emptiness, which is your being. It is what is, not what appears. Right? A state of excitement and ecstasy is a high vibration. Yes, of course it is. And it will attract more high vibrations around it, but you can't sustain it. It is not a permanent state. And thank God it isn't. Right? I mean, why not? Why is that a permanent state? Why not grief be a permanent state? When you look at the states of emotions and vibration, why is, we say, oh, I really want that one. I want that one to be permanent. Of course, the moment it was permanent, it would get boring as hell. It's always in the contrast. Nobody says, I want grief to be permanent. Well, why would you say I want ecstasy to be permanent? No, I don't want it to be. I want it to be what it is. I want it to be purely what it is. I want to enjoy it completely and totally embrace it in that moment. And one of the reasons I can do that, I can totally embrace it in that moment, is because I know it's temporary. That's part of its charm. That's part of its wonder. I know it's going to end. Everything is going to end. That makes me highly acute, highly present in this moment. It makes this moment utterly precious. Not a stepping stone to some other moment. This one, because it's never, ever going to happen again. And at the same time, I'm sitting here looking at one moment after another, coming and going, coming and going, coming and going, that's never going to happen again, and I'm not moving. The sense of being hasn't budged. Everything is appearing to it, disappearing from it. So that which is doesn't come and go, doesn't go up and down, doesn't fluctuate. But it's because of that that everything else can exist at all. Without that pure excitement, who's there to notice? You have to be there. And so it means that you are something else. Does that answer it for you, Arby? Tom. Hello, Tom. Message retracted. Sarah Sands. Hi, Sarah. Hi, Sarah. She says, hi, G. Dave and Elaine. One consciousness, but a multiplicity of minds. Yeah, absolutely. That's what it is. Although there may be similarities, can an awakening manifest differently according to the conditioning and characteristics of a particular mind? Yes, of course. Of course, it's going to, the awakening is a realization, and it's always going to appear within the context of the particular story. I mean, you awaken to the fact that it is a story, but it's a nice story. It's an interesting story, and certainly it manifests differently in Buddha than it did in Christ. It did in than to Nisargadatta or to any of them. Each one of the stories is different. It manifests differently, of course, but everything is awakening. Awakening manifests itself as somebody asleep, somebody who completely doesn't get it. It's appearing in consciousness, right? So that is also the manifestation of the awakening. We're just seeing the asleeping, the asleepening, right? So when you talk about consciousness and one consciousness and a multiplicity of minds, if you really look closely at it, you can just kind of look around. Imagine yourself in this big ocean of water, right? And everything in this ocean of water is made of the water, right? And the water's got some stuff in it to make some things a little solid and other things not. But it's all the water that everything is being made of. But it tends to condense. It gets more dense in certain areas. Over here, a little density happens. It actually happens in the water, usually through temperature and stuff. You can get these little pools where the water here is more dense than the water around it. And it's all the same water. It just happens to be for the temperature. And then the temperature stabilizes before you know it. That very subtle form is gone. Well, a mind is nothing but a condensation of thoughts. That's all it is, right? And the fact that this particular set of thoughts I've decided are mine really doesn't mean they actually are. I just decided they are, right? Right. I get we get all sorts of thoughts going through our head. Most of them we just kind of reject. They go by. But that very same thought buzzing around, right, condenses somewhere else, right? And now there's a thought that says, that's my thought. Now, I don't have that thought about it. Somebody else, what I call somebody else, does. I'm convoluting this, I think, a little bit. Every one you experience, thought, feeling, emotion, sensation, body, everything, are just these little temporary concentrations of energy. There's no self there, okay? The self is consciousness projecting its selfhood on what it's perceiving. I mean, and that is the essence of the asleepness, and that is the totality of awakening, is to realize that that's happening. That me, because I am the self, and it's clear, I do exist. I don't need anybody to prove that to me. That sense of being a self projects selfness on what are in fact nothing but forms of energy that are not sentient, they are not self-aware, they do not have any of that at all. Right? Now that doesn't mean the person you're talking to, right? Right? Oh, there's nobody there. It means that that, everything is a condensation of energy, and there's one consciousness that's viewing the whole of it. So if the consciousness appears to be over there and having a conversation, right? You guys are listening to me right now. It is the same consciousness. The energy patterns are different, the thoughts are different, the forms are different, but the actual point of perception, the actual entity that is cognizing it is exactly the same. You know, the space here in Washington, the space in France where Sarah is, same space, isn't it? You know, take the objects out of the space and it's the same space. You know, space is indivisible, right? Consciousness is indivisible. It is the same everywhere. What's in consciousness is different everywhere, just like what in space is different everywhere. But it doesn't break up space. It doesn't leave a mark on space or a trace. It doesn't mess with space, right? But so when we see it just as that in which things are being contained, and that in which they are all contained is what is actually the substance out of which they are made, you begin to see the unity of it all, and that consciousness is all there is. So, how's that, Dave? David and Elaine, how's that? Sarah, hi G. Sorry I'm late. Dear G, Nagarjuna said, Nirvana and samsara are one. Yes. Is this part of non-duality? I'm most grateful for your ideas on this. Thank you for your answer, Sarah. When seen correctly, both nirvana and samsara are simply projections of the mind. If I look upon the world as being functioning independently, objective, you know, there's me and then there's the world, that sense of separation, I'm going to project all sorts of qualities about it. I'm going to be afraid of it. I'm going to be begging for it. I'll be setting up relationships with this object. That is samsara. Samsara is the sense that there's me and then there's the rest of the universe. The world is a real entity in and of itself that I am perceiving. When it is seen that it is not that in fact it is completely within perception, it is of consciousness, in consciousness, and made of consciousness, that it has no existence separate from that, the world as a self-existent entity disappears. It's gone. And that's nirvana. That's what nirvana means. It means extinction. It means the energy that sustains something is gone and it has simply dissolved. They use the example of, you know, the fuel for a fire. Eventually all the fuel is burned up and there's no fire. The two are one. And so whether you look at it as nirvana or you look at it as samsara, it is the same thing. It is pure experience. When I really take it into myself, it transcends both samsara and nirvana, which is what Buddha, especially in the Heart Sutra, made very, very clear, that you're transcending even nirvana. Because if, in fact, there never was a world in the first place, what can go extinct? If it was nothing but a thought imagined that it existed independently from me, everything I know about it came out of that model. So everything I know about it simply dissolves. And if that's the case, then the whole thing was just a picture in my mind, so nothing actually dissolved. Nothing went extinct. No fuel actually burned out. No fire was ever really going. That's the transcendent. Now you've stepped beyond all of it. And I know it's a deep answer. Don't give this over to your mind. It'll mess with you. Because the mind cannot grasp real non-duality. It's transcendent, right? I mean, that which existed before thought, prior to thought, and gives rise to thought, cannot be thought about, right? It isn't a thought. It's prior to thought. Being prior to thought, thought can't go there, right? There's nothing it can do. It cannot approach it because it is without thought. It is a state without thought. It is a state where even thought is just, poof, an image, appearing and disappearing. Nirvana, a thought qualifies for the world, Nirvana and samsara, just the way anything else does. It's subtler for sure, but there's no difference. It's part of the world. In fact, the world exists only as a thought. So Buddha would say it both exists and does not exist. But when you see it like that, real nirvana is the recognition that it never was in the first place. So it can't go away. Right? It was all a projection of mind. And that's exactly the way the Buddha puts it. And again, if you try to think about this, you're going to get yourself wrapped up. You meditate on this, you ponder this, you take this in very, very deeply. If everything that I am perceiving is actually a perception of me, a projection of my mind, what is it really? Where did it come from? All of our theories about its origin and development are all, because the entire thing becomes just pure imagination. We're going, well, then what the hell are we? Now, if you get to that point of total bewilderment, you're right on the verge. You're right on the edge. Thanks, G. Thanks for bringing me right to the cliff and pushing me off. You're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome. I hope does that get it for you, Sarah? It's deep. Your question is deep, so I deserved a good answer. Tom, you talk about placing attention on that which is aware. I agree that awareness can't be found as an object. It seems that attention needs to find a location in space for the sense of being. Where is it? Well, it's what's looking. I mean, to resolve it, yes, by putting your attention on the awareness, you are withdrawing your attention off of external objects and internally, and you're putting your attention on the one thing that cannot possibly be seen, which is yourself. But the act of doing that, the effort of doing that, begins to have an effect on the thought processes. It has an effect on the otherwise chronic unconscious energy always moving outward, and it has us confront the essential mystery, which is my own being, because I cannot point to me and say here I am, right? I cannot point to myself as an object. I can only be myself. So the attention now goes, well, how do you know you exist? If I ask, do you exist? Right? You'll say yes, right? If I ask, are you aware that you exist? You go, yes, right? Now, when I ask the question, and you answer, there was a little delay there, right? Where did you look? Now, in that moment, your attention was trying to find you, right? Now that's good, right? It was trying to find you, because normally the attention is finding objects. And you hit the wall of attention. You hit the edge of the mind, because you realize the attention can't find you, right? It wants to find some kind of object. And then we use words like awareness, which is a word now. It's a sound, right? We can bring it into our heads. So I can, it's awareness, and I can look at that, but that's still the word, right? It's not you. Same thing you say emptiness or any of the words that we want to use for it, right? But all we're doing is really breaking the habit of looking for an object, realizing we cannot find one. Well then, how do I know what I am? Well, not even the question what I am becomes, well, that's really a kind of looking for an object in the back door. I can never say what I am. And yet I have this absolutely undeniable experience of being. Now that is a mystery of the first order, and that's where I really want to get you all hooked. Because when the attention goes there and stays there, realization is very close behind it. So you're really just withdrawing the attention into a place where the attention, it's so subtle, right, that you can actually lose the sense of attention. It folds into the sense of just being, because you realize that your being and the knowing of your being are the same. There's not being and something else knowing it. Being, knowing itself, is being. It's not two. Does that do it, Tom? Does it do it for anybody? Marvelous, marvelous. Okay. Aralda. Arald Kala. Gee, I can see an object and I can see the knowingness of it. Beautiful. However, when I look at awareness by itself, it's hard to locate. Because you can't. You're it. You can't locate yourself. How can I keep looking at something I can't see? It's just, is it just knowing of it? Yes, what's happening here, Erald, is that you are learning to see non-objectively. You're learning not what Muji calls non-phenomenal recognition. You're recognizing stuff, but not in a subject-object relationship, which is the way the mind works. Which is why this seems so weird to people, because we try to put it into those terms. I keep looking at something I can't see. Well, yes, you're going to start looking with different eyes. The eyes that are looking become the eyes that see. This is why it's called self-realization. Right? You realize you can't see it, and yet you know it intimately. And that's when the duality begins to fold in on itself. It simply is one. And one can't look at one. And then you just explore it. Okay, well, but I am it. I know it. I can feel it. I can sense it. I intuitively know that I am. How do I know that? You find that it's always been there. It didn't come and go. Something would have had to see it come and go. It has no past. It has no future. It never began. It will never end. It had no birth, which means no death. And now what happens is the sense of self, the I, which had been so closely identified with the ego and form and all of that, starts to identify with this formless emptiness, with this boundless sense of being, with this thing that clearly has no beginning and end, or end, starts going, well, that's me. I have no beginning and end. I have no bounds. I have no birth or death. I have no limitations. I have no form. Right? So the I literally folds back into the place from which it originated, which is the pure, absolute being. Also, have you had any eye issues? I feel a little cross-eyed when I try to look back at where I am looking from. Well, yes, after, look at it long enough and having enough pain, you kind of go, I think I need a different strategy for this, and you stop doing it. So, yeah, I don't have any eye issues anymore. That's very funny. That's very clever. Remember, you're not going to be able to see anything. You're breaking the habit of seeing yourself as an object, which is an object of thought, and then identifying with that thought and say, well, that's what I am. We're breaking that habit and bringing the I back to what cannot be known objectively. It can only be known subjectively. You can only know it as you be it, right? As you is it, I guess, would be a way to see it. So is that good for you, Errol? Wow, that's cool. Robert Hill. Hi, Mr. G. Hi, Mr. R. I never had any special experience while meditating. Honestly, I don't really need it. But how come some people do? I don't know. I have had some extraordinary experiences in meditation, and it was really more prayer. I didn't even know what meditation was at the time, and it just exploded. You know, I have no idea why. Right? I do know this, that it doesn't matter, right? If you get the big experience, great, right? Here's what I look for: is somebody getting happier? Are they more resilient? Are they more equanimous? Are they harder to trigger? If those are all the case, you are waking up. Don't worry about whether or not you see the angels singing in the heavens parting. It's not really important. What we're after here is to know ourselves as we are. One of the beautiful teachings from Zen Buddhism is that the ultimate state is the same pure, ordinary state you started in. Except now you know who you are. Right? There's nothing special about it, nothing flamboyant, no big deal. Right? Just, first there is a mountain, then there is no mountain, then I am the mountain, then there's just a mountain. Right? That's the Zen trend. It's the hero's journey, right? It really is classic hero's journey. There's the just everyday normal life. Something happens, a fall from grace, ordeal, expanding some special boon, knowledge, power, gift, something, back to the place we started. Share the boons. Ordinary life. Buddha said, the ordinary human being is the Buddha. So just everyone bear that in mind. Look, we all love a good story, right? We all love, we all love the Hollywood blockbuster, right? You hear the story about, somebody who had extreme experience. Yes, and one of my very first experience was not extreme. It was just this sudden insight that I could not say for sure whether I was dreaming what I was experiencing or it was real. I could find no concrete evidence that showed me that what I was perceiving existed independently of me perceiving it. And the more I looked at it, I was just dumbfounded. I was 17 years old. I didn't know what the heck to do with that, right? But it just kind of slid into the past. It wasn't dancing girls or anything like that. At 17, I sure would have wished it was, but it wasn't, right? It was just this. It was just kind of this really shocking insight. 2 years later, at just the absolute lowest of the low, I did have one of those, which was, completely unexpected, totally out of nowhere, and just saved me from myself. Right? A few years later, I had one that didn't have that kind of spectacular thing, but it was just this clear opening, the sense of oneness, the sense of oneness with God. And there have been these little, burps all the way along the line. None of those, for a long time I tried trying to reproduce those. None of those are what really put me in the place where I could say I am awake. That was the nitty-gritty, learning about the nervous, learning how this whole thing works, learning what conditioning is, how it affects you. What is the nature of the egoic mind. So it was the great moments punctuated by complete and plotting, right? When I got my pilot's license many years ago, there was a saying about the people who wanted to become professional pilots, or even you get to the point where you're actually taking long trips. I'll be flying a plane for a couple hours, or if you're an airline pilot, 5 or 6 hours, and they would say that flying is hours upon hours of monotony and boredom, punctuated by moments of sheer terror. And that's a good way of putting it. I think the awakening is the same thing. It's years and years of boredom punctuated by moments of great insight, of great wonder. But again, I look for happiness, I look for peace, I look for equanimity, I look for patience, I look for compassion, I look for it gets increasingly difficult to trigger somebody. Then you know that whether there's been a great revelation, some kind of vision or something or not, the truth is sinking in. And so to me that makes it, that's to me is the most precious about it. Also takes the pressure off, because most people don't have those huge experiences. It's that simple. So thank you, Robert. Let's see. It just kind of jumped on me again. Jorge from Portugal. Hi, Jorge. Hi, GP. Very nice to listen to you. I'm in the tradition of Maharshi, Ramana Maharshi and Papaji. I am not this body. I am not the mind. I'm awareness without object. Want you to comment? How can you possibly? I can't disagree with that. No, but the thing is to both really let that truth. Now you're putting it here, and you're a student of theirs because you've seen that at some level. It may be in a huge opening. It may have been just an intuitive sense that this is really true, that there's more to me than the body. So just deepen it. Just keep deepening it. Let that truth kind of begin to dissolve the contradictory thoughts, begin to clarify both in the mind and the heart and in the body, so that it starts to becoming a living thing. You can just feel that you're not the body. That what is feeling the body isn't the body. That the animation of the body is not the body. That the spirit that makes this body live is not the body. It's not the thoughts. It's not the emotions. It's none of the three elements of which all experience is made. So you just let that deepen. That's all. It's true. I imagine everybody here today, and there's 50 of us, everybody here today intuitively knows that that's true. And I go, why don't I realize it more? Well, you do realize it. The only problem you have is that you're listening to the thoughts that tell you that you don't. All the thoughts that contradict it. And there's a lot of them, and that's the habit energy, that's the patterns that have been put in place, that's the repetition of this thing that says, oh, I'm not that, I've got to be something, right? We believe that thought. So, I think a friend of mine, Cindy Tevens, said, you haven't lost your awakening, you've just gained a new thought. Right? So if that sounds to you true, I'm not this body. Well, if that sounds to you true, that's your intuition. It's true. It is true. So now it's like, well, why is there this conflict? Why is something objecting to that? And become curious about that. I'm trying to like force it away, and I'm going to meditate harder until that thought goes away. I'm not going to give it that much authority and power. I'm just going to kind of sit back and go, well, look at that. Look, that habit of doubting my innate spiritual nature is just one of the habits one of the patterns that got started. And of course, it's in everybody, so it's like not a big deal. So I am the awakened one. I mean, if I wasn't, I couldn't be seeing the thought, right? What's seeing it if it's not awake? Oh, it's such interesting stuff, isn't it? Just interesting and liberating. Well, thank you all for the thumbs up and the shares that are happening. I really do appreciate it. So thank you, Jorge, and great. Ramana Maharshi Papaji, that's really, I mean, I'm kind of that lineage through Muji as well as the Zen Buddhist lineage, also Nisargadatta and the like, but it's pretty much, it's pretty much right here. I love the lights behind you, like the beard, Delgado says. Thank you for all you do. Yeah, I kind of like the lights too, don't they? Isn't that light kind of fun? I actually bought that for my granddaughter. I thought it might be kind of fun for her, add a little flavor, and I decided it looks really good. I put it right behind the crystal ball. It looks like I'm just kind of having a fun time. The other's the salt light over on that side, and behind me, if you can see it, that other little light, it's a little fountain I have. Anyway, it's a nice place for meditating, for doing satsang and the like. So glad you like it. You like the beard? Yeah, it's not that I'm really trying to make a style statement. I just get really lazy about shaving. Let's see. Nazrin says, I'm very open about it. Thank you. Oh, it caused me suffering. I think we covered that, yeah? Hi from Taunton in the UK. Mal Ur. Hi, Mal. Wonderful. Sundis. Oh, I should retract it a little. Robert Hill. Oh, by the way, I was on a week camping trip in the woods barefoot. I didn't need one pill. I was at ease all week and still am. Nature does wonders. Well, when we go to nature, we are communicating with the silence of the self. You know, nature isn't burdened with thought. It's just presence. And the more you realize the beingness in me, and the beingness in that tree, the beingness in that orchid, are all the same beingness, it gets really quiet. And yes, we have become separated from nature, which means we've got now ideas about who we are, completely divorced from the world in which we actually exist. That's insane. You know, as if you could take something, isolate it from everything else, and have it be what it is. It is everything that exists is in constant interaction with everything that else that exists. Everything, right? Nothing exists independently from the setting and environment in which it appears. That's what Buddha was teaching 2,600 years ago about interdependent arising. Nothing arises in and of itself. Nothing exists in and of itself. If you take any object, separate it out from the environment, you can see it has no self. Everything about it is gone, all of the qualities. It becomes pure emptiness. Which is a good way to look at it. When you look at anything, like, okay, if you're tall, right? You're only tall because, at least relative to where you are, you're higher up than others, right? You know, I'm not tall. I'm 5'7", right? Now, if I was hanging out with a band of pygmies, right, I would look like a giant, right? Put me, stand me in the middle of an NBA basketball team, I'd be a shrimp, I'd be a total shrimp. So what am I? Am I tall? Am I short? Am I medium? Well, I am none of those. Height, height is empty. It's empty of any actual self-existence, right? Nothing. It only comes into existence in relationship to something else, which means everything that exists simultaneously. Everything that came into existence at once. And the Big Bang is just our minds slowing down what's happening every single second. This moment is being generated in real time and everything in it. How about that? Ponder as we enter into the next week. Janet McGowan. Hi, GP from Scotland. Good to have you. What do you think of helping people? I like the idea. I seem to be put in situations to help others. Is this just happening by itself? Can you speak about free will? Yes, it is just happening by itself, but there's a cooperation there. You're playing with it. You're participating in it. Obviously, there's a desire to help others. The only problem that comes from helping others is when you forget yourself. Is when you turn that into an identity. Oh, I got to help somebody else, which means you don't take care of yourself. You'll get burned out. I mean, a lot of people in the helping professions do that. It's actually a way of compensating for the fact that they didn't get the help they need, which doesn't mean you should stop helping others. Of course, it is our nature. One of the most powerful and uniquely human characteristics we have is altruism, a willingness to sacrifice ourselves for others. Yes, there are some, the animals will do that as well, parents and children. For us, we've really taken it to an art form. So the desire to help others is so natural to us, right? It like anything else, though, it can be commandeered for the purpose of compensating for early childhood and stuff like that. When we're talking about free will, you have to look at it on different levels. Carl Jung made a statement once, which was utterly brilliant enough that Einstein actually quoted it several times. And the statement was this: I can do as I will, but I cannot will as I will. Ponder that. I don't want this to be there's free will, there isn't free will. That would, closed-ended answers I don't like. Again, I want to point you into a direction, what we think free will is and what's my actual experience. When I look closely at what we call free will, what I find is a series of events take place, right? There's a feeling of wanting to head and go into a certain direction, and then there's an energy that goes in that direction, and then there's a thought that says, I did that. And it does happen in that order. So I don't want to say there's no such thing as free will. What I want to do, though, is point you to where is this place from which the impulse and motivation to move or to do something, to make a choice of something, where is that arising from? And if there's free will, if there's such a thing as me there, choosing, then I should be able to find it. But all I ever experience is a choosing thought, a thought that says I choose. I never actually experience the process of choosing. So on that level, there is free will because choices are being made all the time. But when I look at it existentially, I cannot find the one who is doing the choosing, which means then to me that the process of choosing is in fact a cosmic event. There's not someone choosing, right? There's not someone's personal free will. It is the free will of the universe, you might say. It's a cosmic event. It's a direct unfoldment of the nature of being itself. And to me, that's a much better way of looking at it. So it isn't like Because people think there's no free will, oh, then everything is predestined. Well, that's nonsense too. Well, who predestined that? And if this is predestined, the only way to know that is you got to go back to see find the one, the guy behind the curtains, who's planning what's going to happen, right? Right? So it's neither predestination, nor is it free will. It's a cosmic event. It isn't a personal event because, when you really stop and look at it, you don't create your thoughts, you receive them. You never have the experience of creating a thought. The creating a thought is an idea that got that popped up when we saw the thought. Well, I must have created that, right? Well, wait, stop. No, you didn't. And when you created your hair, right? It's just growing. It's just happening. It happens according to patterns and all that. We can recognize all of that. And then if you keep doing this, you get back to this place where you see that you are the pure experience. You're the absolute witness. And what is being witnessed is flowing directly out of you. But it's not an act of will. It's not an act of volition. It's not a person making a choice. It is a cosmic event. That's the best word that I have for it. Does that help? Annette, namaste G. Hello, Annette. There is only one life being led. Yes. There's only one life being led. There's one functioning. One thing is happening, and one thing only. We call it life. And our minds, trying to make sense of it all, cut it up, We split being into beings. We split heart into hearts, soul into souls. It's one being. One being. I don't know how else I can say that. How many times can you say it, G? Oh, no, can't say it. Thank you for that, Annette. Yes, you are that, and you are that life. Yeah. If you think about yourself as the totality of life, you can't hurt anything. And you'll see everything is this totality of life. And suddenly the oneness and the diversity don't seem to contradict themselves. The two Renaissance. Hi, GP. Hi. What do you think about the new non-duality movement with the help of smoking 5-MeO DMT? Love your talk. Yes, the resurgence of the plant medicines. I actually think it's a very good sign. Extremely helpful for processing. The best medicine out there for traumas and the like. Western medicine just wants to dull everybody's mind and suppress symptoms and keep making money. They don't want cures. A real medicine would have to take us down to the depth of our being, the depth of the origin of the trauma, and help us walk through that. Things like 5-MeO DMT and ayahuasca and peyote, which have been used ritually and ceremonially as medicine for thousands of years. And that's the main difference. It has to be done ceremonially. Now, it's inevitable as that stuff makes its way into the culture. And I heard Dennis McKenna speak once. He's the brother of the famous Terence McKenna, those of you might know, regarded as maybe the leading, and certainly one of the leading ethnobiologists in the world. He studied these things inside and out. His comment was simply, we think that we're taking the plants out to help. He says, the plants are taking us. Mother Ayahuasca has decided it's time for healing in the world. And so she has chosen us, like we're the bees, and she's providing the pollen, and we think we're doing it ourselves, and we're serving the interests of a higher power. Well, we certainly are serving the interests of the higher power. Is it Mother Ayahuasca? Maybe. I don't know. But it's inevitable is that merges into and affects people with very different cultures. Remember, for thousands of years it was done, but these were tribes. It was integrated into the culture. They knew the language of it. The shaman was the guide in there. It was a very significant ceremony. It was, in some cultures, it was the kind of thing you did once in your life. That was your vision quest, and you got it, and that was it. You didn't do it again. Others, at different stages. It wasn't a party. It wasn't merely psychological. It was existential, right? Now, is that emerges like anything, like even non-duality, the whole language of non-duality, the way phrases are put together and stuff, is it influences different cultures, right? That cultured mind is still going to be there, and it's going to start influencing it. And of course, at first, it's going to simply absorb it and try to spin it within the context that it already believes to be true. It takes it a while to actually do the alchemical shift at the root of it, so that it isn't just a cultural interpretation of something. The culture itself becomes transformed by the depth of the insights that are moving into it. So I think a lot of the language that is arising to describe the existential experiences, the experience of being pure love, the experience of what they call an ego death, where the ego falls away, you're just pure being, a sense of being utterly fearless. They used it on people with terminal illnesses and stuff who've lost their fear of death over it. People with PTSD and the like. Amazing stuff. And one of the ways in which they've tried to explain it and talk about it is using terms that really belong to non-duality or mysticism. Matter of fact, I don't know who the guy is who came up with a standard by saying that the depth of the experience of one of these plant medicines, which they studied clinically in a lab and that sort of thing, the depth of that experience was the depth of the level of mysticalness, the mystery, the mystical experience was a direct correlation to the level of healing they got. There's something about having the mystical experience that is utterly transformative. Now, of course, we're chatty beings. Look at me. 2 hours, I'm just chatting away, right? We want to describe this. You have any kind of an experience, whether it be you've just seen God on ayahuasca, or you've seen God from meditating, or God just kind of showed up one day like he did for me on the bridge, right? You want to be able to put that into language, because the actual experience itself is valid, and it's valid. And that's part of the mystical experience, is what you're experiencing is true, even though it's completely subjective. Nobody else could possibly validate or verify that for you. You just know. That's the heart and soul of the mystery. It's the heart and soul of myth. It's the heart and soul of non-duality. It is the heart and soul of real spirituality. It's the heart and soul of religion, right? Religion is actually just a practice that grows out of that, out of the mystical experience. In fact, the word religion derives from, I think it's Latin, religio, which simply means to reconnect, to move back. It's just all of a sudden all this outward facing stuff, all the traumas and stupidity and insanity and neurosis that we all suffer from, and all of a sudden, poof, it's gone. We want to give that language. we also realize that because of the truth of it, the truth of that and the truth of my everyday life and the state of the world, this is real, this isn't. We can see very clearly that this is madness because we've tasted sanity, right? So we're going to borrow language from wherever we can, metaphorically, through parable and story and storytelling, through mythology. I've just spent some time, got a whole bunch of, just rekindled my interest in Joseph Campbell as he was talking about all these things. There's a whole mythological language that can be used for it. As a matter of fact, a lot of the myths very likely had their origin from those kinds of experiences. I mean, it's the danger is, of course, that when there is an intense experience, it is going to be interpreted at first, right? Unless there's some real wisdom and guidance and experience brought to bear, the experience will always be interpreted within the context of the culture as it is. That's what happens. I met people who have received the Holy Spirit, right? Within the Christian tradition, you receive the Holy Spirit, and I've had conversations with them. And what it was an emotional enlightenment. They felt free. They felt one with God. Everything fell away. They felt forgiven. Their traumas were temporarily suspended, right? It was, just like a trip, right? And it was real. I could tell. I could look in their eyes and I could see exactly what they were experiencing. But then, because it was in the context of their Christian church, the entire experience got commandeered and interpreted from the context of their particular ideology, and it completely shrunk. It lost. It became nothing. These people became fundamentalists. An intense experience which now ended up reinforcing the cold intellectual fundamentalist point of view. It ended up actually solidifying it even more. People got totally stuck there. But that was the only context. They didn't have another context for understanding it. I did, so when I would talk to these people, I understood exactly what was happening. And on rare occasions, somebody's open enough to hear a different way of looking at it, but usually not. So as the veil falls apart, as consciousness expands, as it is necessarily, we're going to be looking for language to give expression to it. That language is going to be very poorly used at first. It's going to be mistaken. We're going to try to put the new wine into old wineskins. And of course, Christ said, you put the new wine in old wineskins, you're going to break the skin. Not to mention, it's going to smell. It's not going to taste very good, right? You can't do that. But to have a wholesale eradication of the whole context of your understanding of the world, you can't blow that away in a second. It's going to take some time for it to colonize, to infiltrate, to dissolve, to transform, to alchemize. It's going to take time. Is that answered for you, to Renaissance? Polana says, good evening. Just wanted to tell you I am grateful for having found you. Thank you. Thanks for your kindness and wisdom. Greetings from Slovenia. Well, thank you. Anja, it is a really vivid satsang. Thank you so much, GP. Oh, you're very welcome. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth. I really don't. That's part of the joy. I'm in the audience too. 1010. You're definitely not a chicken burger. Maybe a tofu burger, a veggie burger. Sarah Science, thanks. Gee, that was perfect. Very good. Tom says, thanks, G. You commented. You confirmed perfectly I'm on the right track. Indeed you are. You couldn't get off the track if you tried. David and Elaine, thank you for your answer, GP. So clear and illuminating as usual. And thanks to the source of all intelligence for all of us. David Maloney says, "Hi GP, is the frequency between periods of peace and periods of conflict an indicator for progress?" Yes, at times it feels totally random to me. Perhaps it's the illusion of autonomy. It's a good question to ask yourself to see if it is. Yeah, periods of peace and conflict. Whenever, as you notice that they're shifting, and they're shifting more towards peace, yeah, you're on the right track, right? The inquiry is having its effect. Also, when the periods of conflict come up, and they increasingly disturb you less, you simply let yourself be with them. That's an indicator as well. Are you becoming more peaceful, more happy, more loving, quicker compassion? Well, then it's working, right? Then the serum I've injected in you is working, right? Oh, it's working. As far as the illusion of autonomy, the illusion of autonomy just rests upon the illusion of a separate self, that we aren't one. But the whole thing here is, don't turn it into a numeric one, right? Right? Because the real one is both one and many simultaneously. It is the essence of it all, and it is the diverse manifestation of it all. And, to see the essential oneness, that those are two sides of the same coin, is to step into the transcendent. Now you've gone beyond. Brian in Virginia. Wait, you're also a pilot? What can't you do? Yeah, it was a time I really wanted to be a pilot. I learned how to fly airplanes. I got fairly advanced in it. I made a lot of trips. I flew all over California. I owned my own plane. I was part owner of a plane for a while, so I got to fly my two sons around a lot, which they absolutely adored. And my youngest son got the bug bit him, and he's a pilot now, not a professional one, just for himself. Yeah, I learned how to do that. It was very, very fun. Yeah, haven't done it in a while. But it really was fun, especially when my sons were young. It was really great adventures. Actually, it was fun on a date too. Going from San Francisco to oh God, what was the name of that town? Like 125 miles north of San Francisco, and I'd go there for lunch. It was kind of fun. Sandis. GP, I had a oneness experience good few years ago and loads of healing after. Could you talk about post-oneness experience, cleanup healing on a human level, and how did you discover your true self? Well, for me, it's just more about discovering who I wasn't than discovering who I was, and it still is pretty much like that, because who you are is a mystery. You can't possibly point at the infinite and say that's what you are. Even the word infinite is really a kind of a silly us trying to capture what can't be captured. So we give it a word. We call it infinite. And okay, I get it. Yeah, it's the infinite, right? It's infinite. Yeah, you tweet. The nature of yourself is unknowable. It cannot possibly be captured in anything. But thank you for bringing that point up, because there's this huge myth in spiritual circles, although I'm seeing it less and less. I'm seeing more questions like this, which really makes me very happy. And that misconception is that somehow at a moment of awakening, that's it, you're all done, right? All of your problems drop away, you become, it's rainbows and dolphins, you become completely functional, everything's, all the bad habits and stuff are just gone in a moment. I used to think that was the case, and I thought I must be a complete buffoon, because that wasn't my case. I mean, I at 19 years old, all of a sudden, I was completely and totally aware of the reality of the essential innocence in every human being, and I could see it. And my life was a total disaster. I was so dysfunctional. I didn't know how, I could barely tie my shoes. There's some things I could do just, like falling off a log, right? Certain things, and other things were just utterly, I just could not get it together, right? So it took me, I kept thinking, oh, I just need another great big experience, right? Oh, geez. It took a long time to become mature and responsible for the balance of it, and to see the deeper picture is what is described in Buddhism as the path of the Bodhisattva, to save all beings from suffering. And that an important step on that path is awakening to the reality of your being, but the next steps are doing what Christ did, right? Taking on the sins of the world, right? Making all suffering your suffering, not so that you can sackcloth and ashes, but you can process that through the same mechanism by which you have been healing your own. And so I do talk about post-awakening sadhana. What is the practice for once you have awakened? Well, for the one I developed, I call inner reconciliation. And it's the same one I give to somebody before awakening and the same one after awakening. Here, it works in both cases because what it's doing is working on the level of the energy system of the conditioned mind, is honestly and heartfeltly dealing with all of the traumas, all of the pain, all of the deprivation, all of the cruelty, all of the brutality, all of the transgressions, all of the harm you've caused yourself and others, and really eradicating all of it in this present moment. That's what it really means to overcome to be free from karma. You are freeing yourself from everything that does not conform to the reality of your being, but you're doing it through healing, through the expansion of the heart, through the opening of the heart, through the embracing of human suffering, which is very different than just trying to get rid of the suffering. You get rid of it by going through it. I heard one quote, I think it was Almas, A.H. Almas, who said the best way to get into hell is to resist going to hell. So, as far as how I discovered my true self, it's been an ongoing thing over decades. Little by little, first an opening of the mind, an opening of perception. And it really started in earnest at 17 years old when I realized that I had no way of proving that what I was experiencing was objective. It could be just a dream. And I remember even as a little kid imagining, okay, what if I die? Is this just a dream? And I tried to imagine myself dead and then going, oh, that was a dream. So then where would I be then? Right? And then at 17, it just went wham. I have no way of knowing. And I looked at everything everybody said, and they were just assuming that was the case. That, oh yeah, this is an objective world. Well, how do you know? And I could not find, and I even talked to some people who were smart, I could not find any kind of explanation that proved it to me. So, now I was 17, the thing I thought about most was like music and girls, right? That was it. So it wasn't like I was like deeply pondering it or anything like that. It just came out of nowhere. I saw it. It really kind of shook me. But it did open something up in me, because after that, a lot of traumatic material started to come up. So it wasn't just this visionary insight, right? It was something that broke something open, right? It kind of opened a part of me that was just kind of an assumption that was grinding along. And all of a sudden, traumatic material, I started becoming depressed. I started becoming really negative and dark. to the point where I was done. I didn't want to be me anymore. I was just a disaster. And that's at 19 when I had the experience that many of you know of, where the entire thing just exploded. But then it's been a lifetime of taking this seriously. Not always. Sometimes I, fall asleep where I happen to be. And it was really Zen Buddhism where it finally landed that there was no position to truth. That truth was the positionless position from which all the flow of opposites is constantly being perceived, and that to take a position was to become stuck, and that was suffering. And the moment you simply remained empty, no agenda, no nothing, that you were in movement, right? So that it wasn't that you don't become something, you're just never stuck there, right? So I'll be when I'm a teacher, I'm really teaching, When I'm a grandfather, I'm really a grandfather. When I'm a partner, I'm really a partner, right? So none of those are you, right? And now complete and total freedom to be those without getting stuck anywhere. And you've probably heard me say that the Sanskrit word for suffering is dukkha, which refers to the hub of a wheel that is out of true and can't turn anymore. Suffering equals stuck. The moment I take a position, I have eaten the fruit of the knowledge of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. If I take a position, then this is the right position, and that's a wrong one. This is good, this is bad. Or in the case, of us and God, God good, me bad. I've taken a position, and now my entire life, our entire culture, has been formed by that taking of that position. So I guess it's still going on, right? I realize now there's no end to it. There's no place where you just discover that your true self is really undiscoverable. It's just forever unfolding. And so every time you look around, whatever you see, it's the self. Quote the Sufis, wherever the eye lands, it sees the face of God. Does that help you, Sandis? Spiral dynamics. Hi from France. What is subconscious mind? Can we use it to create our reality? God, that's a big question. Oh, and I'm already 11 minutes over. Okay, this is my last question. All right, sorry about that, everybody. I'll try to come to understand what's happening. Okay. Oh, I like that. Thank you, Dale. Because I was able to attend Satsang Live. I keep getting an idea. I should have a question, but I keep realizing I don't have one. Yay. Oh, Sandra says she's going to recommend me for Buddha at the gas pump. Yeah, please do. I think there's already a sheet there. Somebody started one, and they've got this rule that if somebody starts another one, it kind of negates it all. So if you put my name in there, there should be something there where you can, add your name to the list or whatever it is, because that's the way it works. If enough people recommend you, end up being a guest on that show. Anyway, let me get back to Spiro's question. The subconscious mind. We can look at it existentially, we can look at it from the point of view of conditioning, we can look at it psychologically. Well, since I'm going to look more metaphysically or psychologically, because your follow-up question, which is can we use it to create our reality? The subconscious is really thoughts, ideas, beliefs that have been going on so long that we don't even realize we're thinking them anymore. You can think of it kind of the equivalent of the physical actions we learn that we don't think about anymore, like talking, right? We don't think about it. There was a time when you really had to figure out. We did it very naturally, of course, right? It's not like, you were studying books to find out how to do it, but there's this constant interaction of imitating and getting the response and the like, and little by little, the nervous system itself learns how to do it so well that you don't think about it, right? There's no pause between an impulse to speak and the speaking happening. As a matter of fact, oftentimes I hear what I'm going to say as I'm saying it, same time you do. So that's the nature. What we call the subconscious is just that same idea, only it's patterns of thought and belief, and they become subconscious because we don't really realize that we're looking at them. Now, those thoughts and perceptions form our perceptions, and our perceptions is our experience of reality. That's when you hear in metaphysical law of attraction circles and like talking about creating your reality. You're not creating you can't create reality. Reality is truth. It's fixed. Reality is what's real. It's what is. So you don't create that, right? It creates you. Right? It's the other way around. But we do, by virtue of what we believe to be true, where we focus our attention and what we identify with, form the perception that is the sum total of our experience. We call that reality. It's not reality, but it is our experience. So within the context of our experience, it's my reality. Right? Now, what makes that up is the subconscious mind is a word people like to use for it. I don't really like that term very much. It's okay. I don't really like it. But the thing that actually shapes your perception are belief, attention, and identification. Those are the three powers. What I focus my attention on is going to get amplified. That's the way the energy system works. If I keep focusing my attention on something long enough, it will eventually fade everything else out of the picture so you don't even see it. And everybody's had that experience of being so focused on something, somebody could walk right up behind you and speak to you and you don't hear them. They're, boom, the information doesn't even get in. That's attention. And when it's really learn how to do it, they call it concentration and the power of concentration and all that. But what it is attention. In our modern world, we're all very stressed because our attention is constantly somebody's trying to grab it, to force a message into it. And what's the message they're trying to force? Belief, right? And there's definitely a symbiotic relationship between attention and belief. My attention tends to go to what I believe, right? So if something happens, a belief about what happens surfaces immediately. That's the story behind it, right? Of what that is, which now shapes my perception of what has happened. So my experience is my perception, but then there's what actually happened. But I don't know what actually happened. I didn't see it, right? All I know is my perception of it. That's all there is to know. And then the final piece to that is the ultimate belief, which is identification. What do I identify as me? Which is a belief. And of course, that's going to automatically dictate where your attention goes, right? So you've got this little system that's in operation. It's a much better way of looking at it than just saying like a subconscious mind, which becomes it becomes an abstraction, really. We don't really even know what that means, right? So since it is those things that are creating your experience, what you call reality, then obviously any adjustments you make to any of those are going to shift the experience. So if you believe that, you're just not good enough for a particular kind of success or a relationship, then you're not going to be good enough for the particular kind of relationship or success. Not because you actually are, but because you have created that. You have literally believed that into existence. It shapes your experience, and that's what you will experience. So it will seem to your particular subjective experience that it is true. It is not. It is just a belief. And this is the way it works. So if you shift that, you're going to shift the perception. Right? It's just easier said than done because these are habitual patterns. and they have emotional content in them as well. They also have basic physiological content in them as well, because we hold on to these beliefs, we get these beliefs, and we feel safe with them. So when we start challenging our focus of attention and our beliefs, especially our beliefs about ourselves or our identity, we run into fear, we run into confusion, we run into resistance, all sorts of things, because we are now dealing with a system that is operating on autopilot, which is what I said in the beginning, the subconscious mind is. So, what I highly recommend, because I'm a non-dual teacher, is not that we just go in and try to shift beliefs, but we actually try to find out what's true, right? A belief can shift, but then that's going to shift, and then that's going to shift, and then that's going to shift. It's going to run out of steam. I may pick up something and focus the attention, and life is better, but it's not going to be enough. And you can see that because this is so subjective, that you could pretty much believe anything into existence. Hopefully what that does is inspiring you. Well, what's true? I mean, what's the truth? Right? Truth is something that exists whether I believe it or not, whether I experience it or not. It is what is, right? It is the actual reality. What's that? That's, to me, is the most important question. More important than just simply creating a better life than I have. As good as that is, and I recommend it, and I've taught people how to do that kind of stuff. Challenge your beliefs, challenge your assumptions. Once you can see a belief is a belief, say, well, it's not really true, and then consistently discipline yourself to take your attention off of that and onto something that's far more viable, far more functional. And you can even see, when you actually see what a belief is, you can see that the roots of whatever we believe about ourselves are either going to sink down into the dirt of a sense of a separate self. It's going to belief that has arisen out of an underlying belief in a separate self, or it's going to be a formation of thought, a belief that is more closely aligned with what's actually true about you. That I am infinitely free. I am boundless. I am deathless. And while the thought may not, be the perfect formation of that, you can tell that the thoughts that lean in that direction, well, those are the ones I want to go to. That's the side of abundance and peace and intimacy and happiness and and compassion and all sort of stuff. Clearly, that would be the tendency for me to want my thoughts to go to. But that's not the truth. The truth is the deep realization that the truth is not something I get. The truth is what I am. That my existence is truth. All right, boy, a bit over today. That's okay. Let me just look through here really quick. Can't take any more questions now, but just say thank you. Our King says, "You look like a doctor." I'm not a doctor. I have no letters after my name whatsoever. I barely got through. I got through a couple of years of college in music, and just kind of went off to make my fortune as a musician. Hi, where are you from? Hi, right now I am in Seattle, Washington. I was born in Chicago, Illinois. I've lived all over the country, New York, Florida, a little stint I was in California for a while. I've stayed down in Arizona. Spent some time in San Francisco and India and all over the place. Originally, I'm from Chicago, and every now and then a little Midwest twang pops out. Not very often. Wonderful satsang, 11 p.m. Off to bed, you guys. Yeah. Thank you for such powerful satsang, Laird. Thank you, Laird. Janice recommend me. Great. Thank you for recommending me for anybody else who wants to. I'd love to be a guest on that show. It's a good one. Also remember to like and share. If we're already I can't answer more of your questions. Now, thanks for illuminating. Thank you, GP. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Spyro. Thanks, Pete. Thank you all. And please remember that if I didn't get to your question, it got answered anyway. Right? Just because I didn't pick it up exactly, really, just I always say the same thing over and over again. The words kind of change, the images kind of change, but it is pretty much the same thing that I'm saying over and over again. I'm constantly pointing you back to the place that is the answer to all of your questions. That place I'm talking to, that sense of being. Well, it seems so, I don't know, slight, seems so ordinary, so well, what's there? It seems so empty, right? Because it is. The answers are all there, all of them. So, thank you all. Thank you. Thank you very much for being with me today. Anybody who would like to help support this, I am going to be doing the class I did on oneness was just such a success, huge number of people, that I'm going to be doing another one in September, a related subject, not exactly the same kind of deal, just pure donation. So if you have it and want to get the oneness class I did, the recording of it, you can just donate anything, whatever you feel you can. Just go to gpwalsh.com/one, O-N-E. There'll be a little thing about it. You can click through, and when I see when that pops up, myself or my assistant will then give you access to it. But it really does. It's amazing how much that it helps. One of those classes can keep me and keep this thing going for a couple of months. So I'm not living like Joel Osteen in a $15 million house. My monthly aid isn't that big. So anyway, I love you all. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you next week. In the meantime, just remember who you are, because who you are is what's constantly sustaining you. Love you all. Namaste.